To most of the drugs that we use in medicine today, it's very harmless. It just doesn't do that much to the physical body.
But marijuana remains one of the most illegal substances on the planet. In US law, it is placed in the most dangerous category, Schedule 1.
It's in that schedule that drugs like LSD, heroin, and marijuana are placed. And drugs that are in that schedule can't be used at all. They're completely off limits. You can't even do any clinical research. For the last 19 years, all efforts to pry cannabis out of Schedule 1 and just move it to Schedule 2 have failed.
In 1972, the US Drug Enforcement Administration's senior judge, Judge Francis Young, commenced hearings on marijuana.
He came up with a 60-odd page opinion saying marijuana is probably the safest drug in the pharmacopoeia, and it certainly has medical utility, and it should be moved to Schedule 2. It's quite extraordinary just how steadfast the U.S. government has been in not allowing this to be used as a medicine. My hunch is that there's some kind of fear that if we use it as a medicine, the camel will get its nose under the tent, and heavens only knows what might happen.
As Judge Francis Young said, it's unreasonable, arbitrary, and capricious, and I add immoral to that list.
It's become so expensive on the street now that frequently these people who need it for medicinal reasons grow it, and they get caught.
I was arrested and taken to a county jail, which was pretty unpleasant, for the illegal rape, as I call it.
I tried it, and I was able to actually cook a meal and eat it. And ever since then, we smoked it for 2 years, and then that's when we got arrested.
12 agents from the local vice squad played Miami Vice, shattered their front door, put guns to their heads, drugged them off to jail.
I didn't have no shoes because they didn't let me, put my shoes on. So I went to jail barefooted. That was my worst nightmare that I've ever had.
It's just awful that these people should have to suffer this way. I mean, the law imposes, here are people who are already suffering from serious diseases and disorders and symptoms, and the law is now imposing another layer of anxiety on these poor people.
The American pharmaceutical establishment and government have been very reluctant to allow people to use marijuana for these purposes, because to do so would be to admit that it had positive uses. And one of the fictions that has to be maintained in the war against this evil plant is that it has no redeeming qualities. And if you established a therapeutic use for it, that would be a redeeming quality. So instead, the government wants people to use synthetic THC or analogs of THC. In my experience, those substances are more toxic and often do not have as good effects as marijuana itself.
THC, or tetrahydrocannabinol, is the active ingredient in marijuana. Ironically, synthetic THC, marketed as Marinol, is legally available for medical use.
Doctors, pharmacists, pharmaceutical companies are very threatened by the idea of people having direct access to substances that really work. And so there is a lot of effort to scare people away from natural medicines by telling them that they're dangerous, that things out of nature are more dangerous for you than the products of pharmaceutical companies. And I think that is not a good thing to tell people. In my experience, natural medicines are much, much safer than synthetic and refined ones.
This realization is spreading. In 1991, Dennis Perron launched a San Francisco citywide referendum for medical marijuana. Proposition P won by a landslide. This preceded similar victories in several other US cities and the California statewide initiative of 1996. Now, in downtown San Francisco, the Brownie Mary Rathburn building is home to the Cannabis Buyers Club that serves marijuana to 10,000 patients. Attempts by the federal DEA to close down the building and arrest Perron and his staff have been firmly blocked by the San Francisco city authorities.
2 million people are infected with the HIV virus. 500,000 people get cancer every year. These people are our brothers and our sisters, our relatives, our aunts and uncles, people we love. I don't think that any of these people, any of these relatives would stand in the way of their brothers and sisters getting a medicine that would help them.
Unfortunately, modern usage of the hemp plant centers around only one of its many uses, its ability to alter consciousness. Like the other uses, this is also not a recent phenomenon.
The oldest domesticated plants are the drug plants. We have historical evidence that they were domesticated by people before food crops. In various cultures throughout history, marijuana has been valued because it was a doorway to other states of consciousness.
It's a blessed plant. It's a blessed plant.
It can give you a little happiness.
Marijuana has been an important religious sacrament throughout Africa, the Middle East and Asia for thousands of years. In Hinduism, the god Shiva is said to have brought cannabis from the Himalayas for human enjoyment and enlightenment.
शिव शिव जितना पीव उतना जीव जे न जाने गांजा के कलियु लड़का से लड़की बने बम बम.
Why then is marijuana use so controversial in Western culture?
Marijuana cultivation and use in Europe probably was mainly as a fiber plant and food plant. And it's very possible that many people who grew it for fiber and for seeds did not know of its use as a psychoactive drug.
Terence McKenna is a leading researcher and author on the traditional uses of psychoactive plants.
The absence of a straightforward hallucinogen or psychedelic in the flora of Europe has given Western man a kind of particular horror of the kind of boundary-dissolving experiences that attend these plants. Another factor is the Christian church. The reliance of magical folk practitioners on plants was consistently suppressed by the church. So we have evolved our peculiarly alienated form of science and social polity completely in the absence of any connection back into the magical side of nature that Celtic and earlier peoples were very concerned to cultivate. So this, I think, is the source of our particularly destructive relationship to the earth and our particularly alienated state of social relationships among ourselves. Only 100 years has Western humanity and civilization actually grappled with the dilemmas which these substances pose. So we're at the beginning of making an adjustment which many traditional societies made a comfortable accommodation to millennia ago.
Our beginning to make an adjustment has been a rough one.
Our nation has zero tolerance for casual drug use.
When I was in England, I experimented with marijuana a time or two, and I didn't like it, and didn't inhale, and never tried it again.
If you do drugs, you will be caught. And when you're caught, you will be punished.
One of the major concerns is drug use among young people.
I think marijuana can make kids space out and lose their concentration, and I think the only remedy for that is good drug education, especially aimed at young people, about what are appropriate uses of it and what aren't. And I don't think it's a good idea to be stoned in school, for example. But we don't have any real drug education at the moment because in the present climate, That's impossible. You can't admit that illegal drugs have any positive uses. And all of the educational materials that are used in schools are designed to scare people away from that substance by exaggerating its dangers, and that doesn't work.
If you tell a 15-year-old that all these terrible things are going to happen to him or her when they smoke marijuana, and they've already tried it and they know that it didn't, why should they listen to you when you tell them that crack cocaine might kill them? I wouldn't have if I was 15 and was misinformed like that.
I think that kind of education has a very negative effect. I think it enormously stimulates curiosity on the part of young people to try the forbidden substance.
Now, I can imagine a few whispers out there. Maybe you think we'll never get drugs under control, that it's too easy for the dealers to get back on the street. Well, those days are over, too. The revolving door just jammed. Some think there won't be room for them in jail. We'll make room. We're almost doubling prison space. Some think there aren't enough prosecutors. We'll hire them, with the largest increase in federal prosecutors in history.
America is now the country with the highest rate of incarceration. Approximately 20% of criminal convictions are marijuana-related.
There is no inherent psychopharmacological harmfulness of marijuana, which is anyway comparable to the harm of arresting more than 400,000 people, mostly young people, for marijuana transgressions every year in this country.
We will look back on this era and the response to drugs in this country and think that was worse than what happened in the McCarthy era. It is insanity run amok, and there's not a sane voice in the federal government saying anything about it.
All this vigorous prosecution of marijuana, for example, has changed a situation where people grew their own, and usually rather mild marijuana, into a situation where marijuana traffic is dominated by organized crime.
The cash crop in California that is the most profitable is marijuana in California. A number of other states also depend heavily upon the production of marijuana. In addition to that, you have the profits made by banks through laundering money.
What we are doing in the war on drugs is exactly what the most successful drug kingpins like. We are, in a sense, using government money to keep the small-time opposition out of the business, to keep the prices up, and to keep the supply coming from only the most protected sources.
Prohibition breeds corruption, breeds a black market. And we've seen in Australia quite a large number of police officers who have been charged in relation to the supplying of marijuana, and that's the corruption element that's inbred.
Lawrence McKinney holds the patent for extracting natural THC from marijuana plants for medical use, but the war on drugs has prevented him from using his patent.
The major advantages of the drug war to the Justice Department is that the RICO statutes allow them to confiscate and sell anything they can find that's connected to any person who has any large amounts of marijuana. And the result has been such amount of money, over $1 billion last year, that these drug laws are simply phenomenally profitable to the Justice Department.
Fighting a war on drugs is big business now.
It is strictly to encourage this society of people who can't imagine themselves in another job other than fighting a war, and when they run out of wars outside of the country, then we're implementing our own military on our own people, and it's just gotten totally out of hand.
Law enforcement, whether they are military or not, constantly try to take on more and more of the appearance of military, and it's a psychological tactic as much as anything else. When this happens to someone, the helicopters will come down and they'll hover and they'll direct troops, or there'll be troops traipsing in the woods near your house, and your animals will get frightened, and your babies will get frightened, and you'll get frightened, regardless of whether you're involved in anything illegal.
When the walls have begun to crumble, when the laws have begun to burn, when the wind is singing freedom, when the stone begins to turn, when the wind is singing freedom, 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 freedom.
You have vast amounts of money internationally spent to force other countries to go after their marijuana. Nepal was one of the last countries in the world that had a controlled marijuana marketplace, you might say, that was well controlled by the government. Now, because of the pressure from the United States, they made it illegal. With marijuana suddenly illegal, the trafficking was taken over by criminals. And these criminal smugglers very rapidly began to discover there were things that were more valuable than marijuana to smuggle, and infected Nepal and that whole area with, heroin smuggling and worse. So it shows you an example of how just with a few dollars and a little bit of pressure, the United States can take a regulated, non-harmful situation and turn it into a situation of crimes, victims, money, and extortion and death.
The repression of Lebanon's ancient hemp industry occurred recently during the Gulf War at the behest of the US government and Syria's President Assad.
Now we are friends with Assad, and the United States is backing his efforts to wipe out marijuana growers in Lebanon with tanks. That's what we do with our marijuana policies worldwide. The United States drug policy in toto affects every country.
Eddie Engelsman is head of drug policy for the Dutch government.
We think that cannabis use is hazardous. We have a very, I must say, comprehensive anti-smoking policy. But does this harm or this risk of getting any harm justify such draconic measures? We think no. At least our policy shouldn't do more harm than such a drug would do.
Every major government study ever publicly funded that studied hemp has come to the conclusion that criminalizing it is a bad methodology. Richard Nixon wanted to really drive the stake through the heart of marijuana, so he appointed a 21-member committee.
The Schaefer Commission recommended that marijuana be decriminalized. Nixon just denied the results, rolled right over them.
The recent US study, commissioned by conservative California Governor Duke Majan, recommended that adults be allowed to grow marijuana plants for personal use. The embarrassed governor refused to endorse it. It's a similar story in Australia.
Since 1970, there have been up to 12 inquiries or royal commissions or parliamentary inquiries into the drug marijuana, and all of those inquiries have recommended decriminalisation, and yet no government has been prepared to stand up and say, well, the inquiries have recommended decriminalisation, we will act on the recommendations of the inquiries. All the surveys show that over 50% of the community accept the use of marijuana, and if that is so, then what you're doing is getting a law that is enforcing something that the community doesn't necessarily want enforced.
In Holland, the drug problem, the issue, is considered an issue of health and welfare. So it's not for the police and the courts. One objective of our cannabis policy, if I may say so, not prosecute people. It is illegal, but to a certain extent tolerated, which has nothing to do with a laissez-faire approach, but we didn't want to push people underground.
The sale of marijuana is tolerated in many Dutch coffee shops.
Nowadays, cannabis users have nothing to do with users using harder drugs. We have integrated education on cannabis in our general health education system in schools. In America, cannabis use is many times higher than it is in Holland, in spite of all the measures and all their wars and all their warning and just say no campaigns.
So what is the attraction to marijuana?
It does carry a fantasy-inducing, thought-catalyzing quality. It allows the mind to rove and scan in a much more expansive domain of information than is normally the case. I mean, if you don't smoke cannabis, you may spend your evening balancing your check account. If you do smoke cannabis, you may spend your evening contemplating the causes of the Greek Renaissance.
It's a perceptual enhancer. It's like a child seeing something for the first time. There's a little bit of that excitement about the visual world. It enhances the appreciation of music and the graphic arts.
I have met many people who I think have experienced increase in imagination and creativity from experimenting with marijuana, who have discovered themselves as physical, sensual, sexual beings on marijuana who otherwise had not developed that part of themselves.
They find that it's useful in gaining perspective and insight in their lives.
Marijuana creates a receptive, suggestible state which could facilitate certain kinds of therapy. It often increases people's access to their own unconscious, to the images that they have in their mind, to their dreams, to feelings which they might not be aware of. So I think it could be in the right hands an aid to therapy.
Not everybody is capable of using cannabis in this way, but it can be used in this way by people who make an effort to learn to use it in this way.
Obviously, Western society fails to offer guidance on how to use marijuana beneficially.
I've seen many people who use marijuana addictively, many people who use it all the time, and I think get very little effect out of it. I see people who smoke it and get groggy and doped out.
The real problem is that people do too much. They don't understand that the best way to do cannabis is approximately once a week.
The desire to have altered states of consciousness is basically healthy and normal. It can have bad expressions, and I think in our culture where there's no recognition of that desire and we don't teach young people how to satisfy it in healthy ways, it's obvious that we're going to see a lot of negative expressions of it.
More money has been spent trying to find something wrong with cannabis than any other vegetable material in human history. And what they've come up with is so pathetically thin that I am confident that it amounts to a clean bill of health for this stuff.
US government health authorities estimate that there are about 350,000 deaths per year caused by tobacco and around 125,000 from alcohol. This does not include alcohol's involvement in 50% of all road fatalities and 65% of all murders. There are 14 to 27,000 deaths from legal medicines, and over 1,000 of these have been recorded as overdoses of aspirin. There are around 5,000 deaths from illegal drugs, while ailments related to caffeine kill up to 10,000 people per year. But there have been no deaths attributed to marijuana.
Cannabis is not a health problem. The problem is that it promotes social values and attitudes which are unwelcome in capitalist market-based society. It's just that simple. A drug like coffee, with a horrendous health profile compared to cannabis, is completely welcomed into the marketplace and the home and the lifestyle of modern people. This is simply that we value certain states of mind and we fear and suspect others. And this is based entirely on value systems that are inculcated from above.
Clearly, the discussion as to how society should deal with marijuana is likely to continue for some time. But is marijuana the reason hemp is no longer the major industry it once was? After all, the industrial-grade hemp crop is virtually free of THC. Hemp historian Gatewood Galbraith speaks from his home state of Kentucky.
There are 14 of these historical markers around the central Kentucky commemorating hemp as a cash crop in the state. It's pretty self-explanatory. We were the world's largest producer for over 100 years.
How did hemp go from being a major crop to almost non-existence in a span of around 50 years.
Historical research conducted by our company suggests that it was the discovery of an efficient hemp decorticating machine and the promised resurgence of hemp to industry that led to the imposition of legal sanctions in the United States and the demise of the hemp industry.
In the early 1930s, the American hemp industry remained highly labour-intensive long after competing industries had mechanised. Furthermore, other fibres like Manila hemp had begun to be imported from underdeveloped countries where labour was dirt cheap. By 1930, the hemp industry bottomed out at 1,000 acres. But hemp technology finally caught up, and the crop expanded to 14,000 acres in the next 7 years. Hemp was poised to become the new billion-dollar crop, as reported in popular mechanics and mechanical engineering magazines written in early 1938. A factory in Illinois had begun producing fine bond paper from hemp fibre. Hemp with its high cellulose content could also now be made into, quote, more than 25,000 products ranging from dynamite to cellophane and all manner of plastics. But in the mid-30s, DuPont Chemicals patented processes to make nylon and plastics from oil and coal.
A resurgence of the hemp industry would seriously have threatened the emerging petrochemical industries, with their synthetic fibre nylon being invented in 1935.
Hearst was a big printer back during the 20s and 30s, and he had vast interest in timberland for paper pulp, which could be used as a result of a chemically intensive paper pulp process developed by DuPont and patented by DuPont. They made their fortunes with these chemical shipments for the paper pulp industry, and hemp represented a less chemically intensive way of manufacturing a higher grade paper. Consequently, DuPont saw it as an economic competitor.
William Randolph Hearst, the owner of the largest newspaper chain in the United States between the world wars, started publishing newspaper articles linking cannabis with violent crime. They renamed the plant marijuana to dissociate it from the hemp medicines, the hemp rope and fabric that Americans had been using profitably for generations. Many stories in his papers told of blacks or Mexicans using marijuana and being disrespectful or violent to whites, or trying to push their drug to innocent whites. The campaign succeeded in getting racist white organisations to support cannabis prohibition. Hearst and Harry Anslinger, the then director of the Bureau of Narcotics, managed to get marijuana made illegal in 1937, thus destroying the hemp industries. This timing is interesting. The alcohol prohibition had just ended, and the people who had enforced it needed new jobs. This may well be why Anslinger pushed so hard to get cannabis banned.
In Anslinger's words, if the hideous monster Frankenstein came face to face with the monster marijuana, he would drop dead of fright. Reefer Madness was one of the many movies made to whip up an anti-marijuana frenzy.
The sale of marijuana is even more difficult to detect and halt than the traffic in drugs such as opium, morphine, and heroin. More deadly even than these soul-destroying drugs is the menace of marijuana. Under the influence of the drug, he killed his entire family with an axe. Incurably insane, a condition caused by the drug marijuana to which he was addicted. It is recommended, Your Honor, that the defendant be placed in an institution for the criminally insane for the rest of his natural life.
The prohibitionist mentality was abhorred by our founding fathers and by Lincoln and by every other great leader in America. They never had the power to prohibit, but they soon gave themselves the power to tax. The laws which outlawed marijuana were not prohibitive criminal statutes. They were tax acts. The 1937 Marijuana Tax Act, where an ounce of marijuana was taxed at $200. It was selling on streets for $1.
At that time, congressmen voting on this piece of legislation were not aware that marijuana was hemp cannabis hemp that that country had been using profitably for centuries. The hemp prohibition was initiated by American petrochemical companies in the 1930s to destroy the economic potential of hemp. It has nothing to do with the chemical effects of cannabis drugs or their perceived danger. It's a blatant case of industrial espionage to remove competition from evolving petrochemical substitutes for superior natural fibres. This was why the prohibition was brought in 1938, and this is why the prohibition is maintained.
Despite hemp being a major fibre crop in America and the world last century, mention of hemp has been erased from museums and textbooks. This display on the history of American textiles in Washington's Smithsonian Institute contains no mention of hemp. When asked why, museum curator Arcadeau replied, "Children don't need to know about hemp anymore, it confuses them." Similarly, in the National Textile Museum, there is no mention of hemp, either on display or in the library catalogue. Another example of the hemp cover-up was the attempted destruction of all traces of the US Department of Agriculture's film, Hemp for Victory. This film, made in 1942, was used to encourage patriotic US farmers to grow hemp for the war effort. After 45 years of burial in government archives, it was rediscovered in 1989 by hemp activists.
In 1942, 14,000 acres of fiber hemp were harvested in the United States. The goal for 1943 is 300,000 acres. Thus, hemp, Cannabis sativa, the old standby cordage fiber, is staging a strong comeback. American hemp will go on duty again. Hemp for mooring ships, hemp for tow lines, hemp for tackle and gear, hemp for countless naval uses, both on ship and shore. Hemp for victory.
Straight after the war, however, the government once again abolished the hemp industry and eventually criminalised the plant.
100 years ago, the farmer produced all of the fiber, all of the medicine, all of the fuel, and all of the food that the society consumed. That's what farming is you raise those four basic categories, fiber, food, medicine, and fuel, and you sell them in the cities. They're the basic necessities of life. The money flows out of the cities back to the landowner and to the producer, where land is the means of production of wealth. It's been that way for thousands of years. Today, 100 years later, the farmer doesn't produce any fiber. If they do, it's cotton, which accounts for 50% of the pesticides and herbicides used in the agricultural sector. The farmer doesn't raise any medicine. It's all been monopolized by the pharmaceutical companies. The farmer doesn't raise any fuel. It's all been monopolized by the petrochemical companies. And if you go into a grocery store and look at the ingredients on the package, you'll find out how rapidly the farmer is being displaced from their heritage of food production. It's all been taken over by the synthetic manufacturers who, in producing these synthetic products, create the toxic waste and the hazardous byproducts with which we're having such a tough time dealing. And not only that, it concentrates wealth in the hands of fewer and fewer people all the time, because the means of production of wealth is no longer the land. It is now the factories and the shareholders and the people who own the controlling interest in those corporations. Does government have the right to tell man or woman that they cannot plant a seed in God's green earth and consume the green natural plant that comes up out of it? That seems such an inalienable right. That seems such a natural and basic way of communing with Mother Earth and with the natural cycle of things.
It really is only a matter of time before hemp returns to Australian industry and commerce. A lot of preliminary work has been done. We have literally thousands of hectares ready to be turned over to hemp cultivation. factories to handle the downstream processing of the fibres are ready and waiting, the industry can develop very quickly once these foolish bureaucratic limitations are removed.
It is just such a simple and benign solution, and if we don't do it, I think we're going to lose just about everything that we hold dear.
Hemp could be and will be the greatest economic engine that we have seen probably in the history of the human race.
From deep within the earth, a voice is calling. The synthetic age is surely falling. Stop running from the gifts that are here for you. Stop running down your self-destructive way. It's time to turn and usher in the new. It's the dawn of the natural cycle, and it's here to stay. It's the dawn of the natural cycle, and it's here to stay.